So I get the great honor of not presenting much to you at all today, but presenting two exceptional speakers. On my far left is Charlie Zitnick, who works for a company called D.A. Davison. They provide financial consulting and assistance to customers looking for energy projects. And I've known Charlie now for too many years, and he's been a great confidant and person I can go to with questions about how projects work, how they finance, and so forth. And I know the members of the National Association of Energy Service Company depend on him quite a bit. And then my immediate left is Madonna Ricken with Florida Power and Light. And Madonna is someone I haven't known for a long time, but I've gotten to know her very well and see that she understands how projects work, how to put them together, how to make sense of the funding, and how that all mixes together to provide proper funding for a project. I'm with the National Association of Energy Service Companies. We call it NAESCO, and we have 150 members. 50 of those members are energy service companies that do the work that's being described in the projects today. We offer an accreditation program. If you decide you want to engage with an ESCO, look for one that is accredited. NAESCO accredits those. We have about 40 accredited companies of the 50 today in our mix, and we do a significant vetting of their background, talk to their clients, and make sure their clients are happy with the projects. And one of the reasons it's so important is the projects that ESCOs do are something that they live with for many, many years, often decades. And so as you have a project and you're going to be working with someone for potentially 20 years, you want to make sure that someone that is reliable and dependable and will be around in the 20-year time. But enough from me. I'm going to turn it over to Madonna here, and Madonna's going to tell you about projects.
So just to give you a quick overview, I've been in the performance contracting business since 1995. Kind of recently moved to Florida. I'm in my 9th year down here from the Minneapolis area. I have worked with a couple different energy services companies, and currently, as Tim mentioned, I'm with Florida Power and Light. I'm on the business development side of the business. We are on the unregulated side, so FPL is actually a utility company here in Florida. How many people are from Florida here? Do we have any? Is everybody from Florida? Let's see hands.
Nobody's from Florida. One person.
Nice. Okay. Excellent. Well, welcome from all these states. But anyhow, we are a utility company here in Florida. I am part of the energy services group, and we work on the unregulated side. We can work with customers across the state, and typically our clients are on the public sector side of the business. So we work with school districts, colleges and universities. We also work with municipalities, cities and counties, and state and federal agencies. And currently, I consider home Tampa, Florida. Has anyone here done a performance contract, or another term is a guaranteed energy savings contract? Has anyone done that with their? Excellent, we got one. Okay. So I'm going to try and walk you through some of the basics. I want to share with you a little bit how performance contracting works, kind of how you throw it together. And then secondly, what do you need to do to really get started? I mean, I'm pretty passionate about this. I've been doing it for a long time. I want all customers across the country to get involved with guaranteed energy savings, because it's just a wonderful way to get projects done when most public entities just do not get enough funding to achieve their mission critical needs. So I will finish up with a couple real case studies, a couple projects that we've done here in Florida to try and have it all go from beginning to end, and tell you a little story so that you can kind of see how it makes sense, and hopefully you can go back to your entities and your home bases and say, hey, is this something that we could actually try? So first, we really look and see how are you currently spending your money, and we really dive in deep to your energy costs. And we do consider energy electric usage, gas usage, as well as water, okay? So that's the energy side of it. These projects are governed by state statute. So Tim, do you know, like, how many states currently have statutes for performance contracting? Is it about 35, 30?
50.
All 50 of them now? Okay, so doesn't matter where you're at, all 50 states do have statutes that govern how these projects work. And basically, step one would be to look and see how you're spending your money. Obviously, if you're not spending money, we can't save you money. So energy is one side of it. Secondly would be the operational costs, and that would fall in the category of like repairs, maintenance. Are you hiring third-party contractors to come in and repair your boilers, repair your chillers, things like that? And then the third area that's considered savings is if you're putting together your 5-year capital improvement budget, typically you have money set aside for larger projects. Well, if you do a project within a performance contract, then you don't have to spend those dollars, say 3 years out or 4 years out into the future. You could also use those dollars as capital cost avoidance. So secondly, then, when we come in and see how you're spending your money, then we do a walk or a site visit through your campus, and we say, okay, if we were able to utilize or implement energy efficient technologies, how much would we be able to reduce all these categories by? Because your energy savings, your energy costs would go down, your repair and maintenance costs would go down, and then if you do have dollars that you were planning to spend on, say, a boiler or a chiller or lights, you could actually use those dollars inside the fund too. So all of these, that's the center silo here. All of these different savings then creates a pool of dollars. And then you take those dollars and that's how you pay for the project over a period of time. Here in Florida, we can go out to a maximum of 20 years. Charlie's going to get a little bit more into the details of kind of the funding part of it, but most of my customers typically set these up on, say, 15-year operating leases, and they have an annual payment, and then they simply reallocate these savings so that the money is set aside, so when that lease payment comes in, they have the funds to make the payment. So really, it's a way of taking those savings to pay for the project. You typically don't need any upfront capital to get these projects going, and they're completely turnkey. So, besides saving you money, you're really going to have a dramatic impact like on the environment of your buildings. And then also, it's really important now, people are very cognizant of trying to become more sustainable, reducing their carbon footprint, reducing their greenhouse gas, things like that. So there's a lot of ancillary benefits besides just the finance piece of it. So in essence, it's really a budget neutral way of getting projects done. In our projects here in Florida, we actually have to make sure that our projects are positive cash flow from day one. So besides paying for the project, you'll actually have funds each year that can actually go directly to your bottom line. So it's truly a win-win. And since we have to guarantee the savings, you're really assured that you're going to have the dollars there to make the payment when it comes due. Because if we miss the savings, let's say we have calculated that we're going to save you $200,000 a year, and when we do the verification part of the project, we've only saved 180. We have to make you whole, so we have to actually, cut the school district or the city or the county a check for $20,000. So typically, and Charlie, you can jump in if you want. Typically, you get a little bit better interest rate because the energy service company is backing the payment per se with the savings. So now, if this is something that kind of interests you, how would you get started? Okay, I've looked at it and I've kind of broken this down into kind of 4 pieces or 4 steps. The first part is a no-cost preliminary assessment. So as an energy services company, we're going to go and meet with our customers and we're going to share the benefits of this program. Step number 1 is we need to find out if there's an opportunity to actually save money. Okay, and this step is as much for us as it is for the customer because we don't want to waste their time, we don't want to waste our time if there's no opportunity. So if there's no opportunities to reduce their energy costs or operational costs, if they've done all their lights and upgraded all their water fixtures and they're using new technology, there may not be an opportunity. So we don't want to move to kind of step 2 until we know that there's something real there. So we call it a preliminary assessment. It's a very high-level overview. We've been doing this for over 30 years here in the state of Florida, so we kind of know what to look at, but it doesn't take a lot of time, but it truly is a partnership. It has to be the customer as well as with us, because we're going to ask questions. We want to know how you're operating your facilities. We want to know what you've done, what you haven't done, what you would like to do over the next 5 or 10 years. So that's a preliminary assessment. Step number 2 is kind of where the rubber meets the road. It's considered an investment grade audit, or a lot of times it'll be called a feasibility study, but really it's taking everything that's important to the customer after we've shared with them what we've seen, and they prioritize what's important to the county or the school district. And then we really come in, we bring subcontractors, because we do bid these projects out. Typically, we have 3 different companies that would bid on each individual project. And then we really have to dot all the I's, cross all the T's. When we deliver that report, it's going to tell them exactly what each project's going to cost, which buildings we're working in, and what savings that they're going to be able to expect from each energy conservation measure. Now, in most instances, there is a cost associated with that, because there's an engineering fee. This takes us a lot of time, and there's a lot of due diligence. So usually right before step number 2, that's where we get to present the whole concept to, say, the school board or the county commissioners or the city council. That's typically where we get in front of these folks, share the idea, let them know what the engineering fee would be to move into this investment grade audit, and get their support. Step 3 then is actually implementing all of the measures that we've kind of laid out in the report. So there might be lighting, there might be water conservation. Typically that looks like, upgrading your fixtures and your shower heads and low flow toilets, things like that. Interior transformers, a lot of those are getting old. They're very costly from an energy standpoint. And then there's the big HVAC. I mean, chillers, boilers if you're in typically a cold climate. Air handling units are notorious. Everybody needs those replaced for air ventilation, air quality. And then there's a gazillion other things. I mean, I'm going to tell you a couple stories. I'll share with you some of the energy conservation measures that we included. But once all of these projects are implemented by us, it really flows through. Everything is turnkey from beginning to end. And then over the period, the term, we actually have to measure and verify that and bring a report back to the customer each year to make sure that they're seeing the savings and making sure that the projects are working properly. And that's where you get this name performance contract, because if the measures are not performing, you're not going to get the savings. So that's where you see the performance-based contracting. So there is a maintenance piece that has to be kind of built into this measurement and verification, because if you're not doing the preventative maintenance, your boilers aren't going to maintain the efficiency, the chillers aren't going to maintain the efficiency, things like that. So it truly is a team effort. And we've never missed a guarantee, and I'm very proud to say that. And you'll see in some of the stories here that we actually exceed the savings by a decent percentage as well. Did you guys want to hop in at all?
I think I would just add, particularly with the unregulated utility part of this, thank you. With the unregulated utility part of this, when Madonna says we've never had to pay out, what that means is they have delivered to the client, to the city or the county or the school district, a feasibility study that is not inflated. I mean, they don't want to pay out, and conversely, the municipal government doesn't want to be paid out. They want the savings. And it's, I think it's quite a badge of honor when you've got 30 years experience and you can say we've never had to write a check, and in fact the savings have been better than we projected, meaning we were conservative in our projection.
Thanks, Charlie. So I just wanted to share a couple quick stories with you guys. A lot of times stories are easier to understand than just looking at bullets on the board. But Lee County School District, they're a school district down along the Gulf Coast, down kind of in the southwestern part of the state of Florida. They've been a customer of ours for probably about a decade now. They've done a few different phases, and we have kind of touched about 40 of their schools. So this was a project of about $15 million, and as you can see, it incorporated many different energy conservation measures. We upgraded a lot of the lighting across the school district. We incorporated occupancy sensors, so they only come on when they need to. And that's actually a great application in kind of low traffic areas, hallways, you know, where when someone's walking down the hallway, the lights come on, but if nobody's in the hallway, you know, why have the lights on? This typically also includes like exterior lighting, whether it's parking lot lighting or the lights on the outside of the buildings, things like that. Water conservation, again, we already talked about that, you know, toilets, urinals, all the fun stuff, shower heads. And then HVAC upgrades. They addressed a couple of their chillers, they looked at their air handling units, and then also they incorporated some thermal energy solutions. So a couple unique things was trash compacting. They had a huge trash bill, so we were able to incorporate utilizing trash compacting because it actually saved them money. And then those savings were able to be wrapped right into the project and help offset some of the more capital intensive projects. So the nice thing about these projects is it's nice to look at short payback items, because a lot of times I've heard from my customers like, oh, you know, lighting, you know, I have electricians on staff and we can do it ourselves. And trust me, I know you guys can. You guys are a lot smarter than we are. You can do some of these projects yourself, but the big thing is trying to do them quickly, because you're not going to experience the energy savings until the project is complete. So when I dig in a little bit deeper, I find out that, yep, we get a couple $100,000 each year in the budget, and we have that earmarked to upgrade our lights to LED technology. And it's like, well, this is a huge campus. Like, how long will that take you? And they're, oh, that's going to take us like 12 years. Well, over 12 years, when you look at the savings, there's a cost of waiting and there's a cost of spreading it out. You could actually do all of your lights on a very comprehensive, holistic basis, and you would be able to generate hundreds of thousands of dollars in savings. So those lights would be paid for really quickly, and now your energy costs have gone down and stay down. So just think about it that way. You know, everybody can probably replace a low flow shower head or, you know, fixtures, but when you're dealing with thousands, hundreds, when you're dealing with an enormous number, it takes time. And so many of my customers have limited labor forces. They have really good people, but you might have only a couple people managing 50, 60, elementary schools out there, middle schools, high schools. So it's an enormous task. So getting things done quickly, comprehensively, having the savings, pay for these projects, and then bundling the short payback items with the longer payback items, because that's really when you get the biggest bang for your buck. So in the case of Lee County Schools, we exceeded the savings. They actually have seen $18.5 million over their contract period. The next project is actually one of our federal customers. Everyone's probably heard of Kennedy Space Center. We've worked with them for many, many years, and they actually are a utility customer of ours. So on the federal side, we actually have projects that if you're the acting utility, you can actually work with your federal customers doing the same type of projects. But this is actually a case study that was put together by one of Tim's past Employers Department of Energy. So, and they actually received an award at Energy Exchange a couple years ago for this project, but this was almost a $20 million project, and we were able to save them almost $1.5 million a year. Obviously, this is a huge campus. They did thousands of lights, I mean, across the campus. So retrofitting, relamping, replacing. Besides interior, exterior lighting, they also did all their street lighting. It's a huge, massive acreage, and they did all their street lighting, so all these savings were able to pay for some of the other projects. So they did air handlers, chillers, boilers. One thing that was real unique is they're very much into sustainability. They actually did a 2 megawatt ground mounted PV system. So we're actually finishing that piece of the project up. This was kind of during the COVID thing, so things got stretched out. We had supply chain issues, but issues, it's not a matter of when, if something's going to happen. I tell my customers it's a matter of when it will happen. And the biggest benefit I look at is how do we address that and how do we take care of the customer. But again, you can see similar things, transformers, plumbing fixtures. So we're very excited and very proud of this project. And the customer is very happy. We've just started looking at the next phase with them. So there's always additional opportunities. So I think that's it. Charlie or Tim, you want to?
Yeah, you have me again. Sorry. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the market that Madonna's talking about for performance contracting. Most of the work, probably 90% or so, is done with public buildings. Buildings that are owned by a state, a city, a county, it could be a K-12 school, or the federal government. The market size, it's about $7 billion annually of work that's done in this area. And as Madonna pointed out, laws exist in every state that can do this type of work. 25% of it's K-12 schools, 20% federal buildings, 10% hospital commercial, and the rest is state, local, university, and a little bit of private. There's another piece that's happening with energy service companies in the project finance area called energy as a service. And energy as a service is one of those, it's a phrase, and people assign a whole bunch of different things they do to that phrase. And so describing energy as a service doesn't mean anything in particular, but in general, what it describes is a case where some of the responsibility and risk of the facility operation is passed off to another entity. That could be that you sign an agreement that you'll provide boiler services for 20 years, and that includes repair, replacement, operation. It could be the fuel, and you just buy the output. That's energy as a service. It's a growing trend. The projects there tend to be a lot in commercial space and not public building space. So it's a changing market. And then I want to fast forward to the slide that Madonna left at. There's something called project leveraging that you can do with this savings. So if you have energy savings as part of a project funding, and you have the ability to capture that savings, the energy savings, operational savings, and so forth, and you can put that towards a payment stream that would pay down a loan. And that loan might be there for 15 or 20 years or however long you want to do it, but that savings stream can pay down the loan. If you have money that you're ready to invest into a project, you're going to replace the lights, you're going to replace a boiler or control system, you're going to weatherize the building, whatever it is you happen to be doing, that project in all likelihood creates some sort of a savings stream. If you can capture that savings stream and route that back into a project, you get a concept what's called leveraging. And this slide shows leveraging. This is a picture out of an Oak Ridge National Lab report that did the analysis of leveraging. Now this report was published in March of 2023, but the report was written really about 2 years before that. Because it takes that long for them to get through the review process and the publishing process to get it out to the public. And so they show the leveraging piece, the little piece of the capital that you have in the middle of the C, that little yellow piece. They show it really small, meaning you don't have much money, and a performance contract can provide a lot of money. And if you add those together, you get that little green part at the top as your bonus. Now today, there's a different situation in that you probably have access to more money than that. Where might that money come from? This is where you get to interact and be the speaker. Where would the money come from? You found a wallet on the street? Where are your friends? Grants. Who's going to give you a grant? The state could give you a grant. That's right. That's right. Federal incentive. What kind of federal incentives exist today? They're trivial, aren't they? There's some pretty good ones out there, aren't there? So there's an investment tax credit, and then there's a production tax credit. But for buildings, it's probably really the investment tax credit that's more of an opportunity. And then we don't really know how it's going to work yet, but there's also this greenhouse gas reduction fund. And we don't quite know how that's going to work and how the money's going to come out, but in all likelihood, that will also be available to help fund projects. And so, how many know about the investment tax credit? Has anybody applied for anything yet? For the new version? Yeah, that's what I hear. Nobody actually applied for it. People know about it. So it can pay for, in general, you can probably get 30 to 40% of the project covered if it meets certain criteria. It could be up to 50 and maybe even 60%. And if you're a commercial building, non-public, and you're private, that tax credit can be applied directly to a tax. It's a payment that the IRS will make on your taxes. So even if you don't have a tax liability, it's a credit. Your company or organizations can still get it. If you're a public building, they've created a process called direct pay, or sometimes it's called elective pay. And you pre-register your project, and you'll get that money actually sent to you as a check from the Treasury. So there's two ways to get that money, depending if you're public or if you're private. But what that causes the yellow C bar to potentially be as big or bigger than the blue bar on the left. And as the C bar gets bigger, the bonus gets bigger. So the more money you have available, the more leveraging that you have. And it's an important concept because what we find in buildings is most of the time, funding building improvements is not the flashy thing. It's not what you want to report to the stockholders. It's not what you want to report to the public if you're an elected official. Yeah, my campaign promise is I'm going to upgrade all the air conditioners in the schools in our district. That's probably not going to win as many votes as we're going to give the teachers big raises. So it seems that money for buildings is often last on the list. I saw a report that said schools have $82 billion of deferred maintenance in them. So it's a pretty significant need. And so leveraging becomes a concept where you might be able to get a little bit more out of what you're doing rather than just doing one or the other. So our next speaker is Charlie Zitnick. Charlie?
Thanks, Doctor. Good morning. Couple of things to add on to what Madonna and Tim have said. The one that came to mind when Madonna was talking about, paying for this over time and being able to get it all done at once. Back when, is anybody old enough to remember when Jerry Brown was governor of California? Back then he was dating Linda Ronstadt, right? Okay. The San Francisco, this don't worry.
I'm on the test for the CEUs, okay?
I'll get to the point, but one of his campaign platforms was that the Golden Gate Bridge takes 17 years to paint, okay? And at the end of 17 years, it needs to be repainted. And so it meant that they were always mobilized on the Golden Gate Bridge. There was always painting going on because they couldn't do it any faster than 17 years with city and state employees. And by the time they were done, they went back and started over again. And his point was, if we just really mobilize on this, contract it out, mobilize it, and get it done, then we don't have to bother with it for, it might not be 17 years, but it might be 10 or 15. So it was just an interesting corollary of you can pay as you go on projects, or you can just get it done. And I think Madonna's point is there's value in getting it done. And on the last slide Tim had up, I'm not good enough on these to go back to it, but the idea of getting it done at once and expanding your scope from not just the wafer thin yellow that he showed, but the tube of blue, is the mobilization costs. It's if you're going to do this little project, the yellow disc that he showed, you're paying mobilization costs in that project cost. If you've already mobilized, doesn't it make sense to go ahead and increase the scope as much as possible so you don't have that reoccurring mobilization cost? And it's very difficult to assign numbers to it, but I think we can all, I hope we can all agree that one mobilization cost beats numerous mobilization costs from a contracting perspective. Just as quick background, I'll, let's see. There we go. A bit about me. Good picture. It's old, as you can tell. I do three things. I'm not really a hobby guy, but I love doing forensic accounting. I got to be fascinating to be married to, and I love doing statistics. And I do municipal finance for a living. So talk to my wife on why she married me. But so when I was flying down here yesterday, I was just thinking about Orlando and why is Orlando Orlando? And I'm pretty parochial. I come from Kansas City, Missouri, and we think we're the greatest thing in the world. So I pulled out some stats, and in 1950, okay, the population of Orlando was 52,000. Okay, population of Kansas City, almost 1 million. Okay, now fast forward to 2023, the population of Kansas City, almost 1 million. Orlando, 2.1 million. So then, my brain being my brain, I started thinking and calculating the population of Kansas moves to Florida every 7.2 years. That's the kind of growth this state has. It just blows my mind. And when you think about facilities and management, it's okay. There's building that's been going on. I mean, their growth curve. Every 10 years they've not quite doubled population, but they're not far from it. So many buildings going back to when the growth spurt happened, which was 1970 when Disney World broke ground, 68 when they broke ground, 70 when they opened. That's when Orlando just took off like a rocket ship. And if you think about all that's been built and all that needs to be maintained, and then the continuing building, that's why we're here talking about performance contracting today. Disclosure on, we are, as required by the SEC, I am a carpetbagger and a crook, and if you still want to believe what I say, here's the disclosure. I love the word oxymoron. It's a term that was coined by William F. Buckley Jr., and an oxymoron is not a guy who bought Occidental Petroleum stock in October of 2008. An oxymoron is a pair of contradictory words, and pretty ugly, military intelligence, working holiday, that's kind of a new one since COVID. But I think for this purpose, the oxymoron that we go to is useful life. And useful life is an oxymoron because if a property is maintained, there is no useful life calculation. There might be in the tax code, but using the pyramids as an example, you don't run out of useful life. The challenge is the maintenance to have the useful life be indefinite, and we know, it's not fun. It's clearly not sexy. It doesn't involve the ribbon cutting and shaking babies, shaking hands. Sorry, shaking hands and kissing babies. It's hard. It's daily challenging. It's a grind, and probably for many in the room, we know politicians really don't care so much about maintenance because it doesn't get votes. Ribbon cutting and projects get votes. Maintaining doesn't. So I think that's the challenge, is to get budget funding to maintain the asset. And if you've got the budget to maintain the asset once it's built, then you're probably going to have money available to do a performance contract. And let's let's keep in mind that a performance contract or energy savings performance contract, there's many terms for it. It is not a finance tool. Financing is a component of it, but it is a procurement tool. It's an alternative procurement tool as opposed to what you would normally do in public, which is a design, bid, build. Okay, so think about your last project, who you hire and how you execute and what you do about change orders and what have you. This is a completely different procurement vehicle allowed under state statutes in virtually all states in the country, different metrics for those, but it generally speaking or generically speaking provides for improvements to be made and then to be funded out of the savings from having done the improvements. And Madonna used lighting as an example, and lighting is a great example and an easy example, and lighting does self-fund. You go in, it's kind of the low-hanging fruit for instance, in a county jail. The jail's 20 years old, it's never had any new lighting. It's high energy usage, it's very difficult space to work in from a contracting point of view. You can hire in under an ESCO model. They come in, an ESCO comes in and does your replacement, and the net benefit is your utility costs have gone down more than your debt payment for having made the improvements. I love this example. It's very recent, and again, parochial me from Kansas City. This is what the Kansas City airport looked like back in the 70s. It was the newest, hottest thing going in air travel and in airport management. I mean, I think you're probably all looking at that in 2023 saying, my God, how could you be more inefficient? But back in the 70s, that was the state of the art. And then we had hijackings, and then we had fuel shortages, and then it didn't go as planned. So this is what we had to work with in Kansas City for many years, and it's coincidental that I'm from Kansas City and this is Kansas City. But here is what that last one looked like a couple of years ago, or last year. Kansas City undertook a tear down of their entire airport terminal structure to rebuild a new terminal. And just to put a sharp point on it, the original airport, all of the ingress and egress, all of the runways, the fuel capacity stations, everything was about $850 million. Okay, keep in mind, this is runways, land acquisition, you name it, everything. $850 million in the 70s. To build our new terminal, Terminal 2.1 billion. Okay, but now please come to Kansas City. We've got a beautiful new airport. So now keep those in mind. All right, this is the Airport Marriott Hotel in Kansas City, built at about the same time as the airport, right? Now, nice hotel. This is a current shot of the same hotel. What happened? It was maintained. There was a motive to maintain that property, and that property, I submit to you, shows as well today as it did in 1974. It's a lovely property. It has reinvented itself numerous times and kept current. The HVAC is current. The in-room units are current. The boilers, air handlers, chillers, they're current. The front of the house is current. The back of the house is current. And that property will probably go on, I suppose, another 50 years. I mean, there would be no reason to tear it down. They've invested and invested and invested to keep it current. And they've had the money, because they've invested in keeping it current, to do upgrades on a consistent basis. So, and this is getting a little off topic and away from kind of how we wrote the agenda, but somebody's got to be the advocate for the maintenance, and it's not going to be the elected officials. It's going to be the people who maintain the back of the house, and without having the advocacy, there isn't going to be budget, and without having the budget, we're ultimately going to get to this. So I just submit to you that it is a balancing act. You can build it, not maintain it, end its useful life after X years, knock it down and start again. Or alternatively, you can build it and maintain it, and it can go on in perpetuity. We're here ultimately to assist you in providing pathways to getting the funding to make the improvements from what should be your current investment in maintenance, that we can go in and as a finance tool and as a procurement tool provide some or all of the financing to do all of the improvements necessary to bring the buildings current. And I think with that, I won't read this verbatim, but it's ultimately somebody's got to do this, and it's got to be you, because if not you, who? So with that, thank you for giving us the time, and I think we've got time for a few questions. Do we? Okay. Anything we can drill down on? Anything you'd like to hear more about? Yes, sir.
One question about trash compacting. How did that save you money?
They had been hauling their trash, so it was a very manual process. So they were paying trucks to come in and take care of the trash. So by getting that trash compactor on site, there was many different buckets of savings, from vehicle savings, fuel savings for those vehicles, et cetera, et cetera. And then obviously you could put more trash in that compactor. I can't remember the exact numbers, but several loads, truck loads of garbage. So it just financially made sense. And we look at that, whether it's, you could even get down to, looking at some of your crazy things, like how much are you paying for, maybe your phone charges or your telephone costs. There's a lot of different areas. It doesn't only have to necessarily be like only energy, because remember, there's operational savings that we can look at, and if we can save you money and it will pay for the project, then legitimately you can do that type of project.
And Madonna, could you go into a bit of detail on avoided cost? We kept it at 30,000, but that's a key component of doing an energy efficiency project and getting your capital stack lined up. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. So let's say, for instance, you're setting aside, let's say, $100,000 a year for a large HVAC project, whether it might be chillers, boilers, whatever. And you have a budget set aside, and you have, say, 3 years from now, you've put $500,000 in your budget, your capital improvement budget. And we come in and we analyze it, and it's like, okay, these are large capital 20, 25, 30-year life expectancy type projects. And the customer only wants to look, say, at a 10-year window. And I'm just using 10 because the math is easier to understand. But what we look at then is saying, okay, if you replaced this chiller or this boiler now, okay, and you've set aside, say, $500,000 in year 5, let's look and see what this will bring back to the city or the county or the school district, because not only are you going to have energy savings because you're replacing that chiller with more efficient chiller, but you're probably spending money on repairs and maintenance because your chiller's 25 years old. So you're probably spending money on an annual basis to have a company come out, or you're buying parts, or however you're maintaining that, it's costing you some money. So now you have energy savings, you have the operational savings, and then as Charlie mentioned, what about this avoided cost capital? So you've already put it in your budget, say 3 years out, that you have $500,000. Well, we can come in and we can run the calculations and say, if you replace the chiller now, and maybe we're gonna get a higher efficiency boiler, so maybe it's not gonna be 500,000, it might be 750. But because of the energy savings, now you're gonna offset some of the costs. So your $500,000 chiller that you were gonna buy 3 years from now may legitimately only cost you $10,000 or $15,000 a year over a 10-year time period. So you've just purchased a $500,000 chiller for $100,000 or $150,000. Does that make sense, or I don't know? Did that make sense to you, Charlie?
Yeah,
because sometimes it gets
absolutely.
unless you're doing this all the time. It's a concept that you have to really kind of walk through and use your real example and kind of lay it out on paper, because then you can kind of see that you can purchase large capital projects for a lot less than you've budgeted for them, because there's other ways of paying for it.
So when you go through, as you go through the steps, one of the steps is an investment grade audit or a scoping document, and that's presented to the governing body. And what that ultimately is going to tell you is, here is the project scope, here are the savings from efficiency and the other two categories that Madonna talked about. But a good rule of thumb is that if you've got easiest way to say it, for every $100,000 that the IGA investment grade audit shows that you would have in reduced costs, that'll provide you funding for about $1.2 million of improvements. And that's a pretty good rule of thumb on a 20-year useful life. Jim, did you want?
Yeah, so a question for both Charlie and Madonna is when these projects get put together, a lot of times the normal process is a low bid. So you go out, you do a bid process, and you pick the low bid, or you pick somebody that's close to the low bid that you think has the right value. How does that differ from the ESCO selection process, and why is there a benefit or a drawback to that? I'll let you go first.
I'll go first. I'm going to give you an example, a real example. And this is a local government real example. And I am making up the figures just because I don't remember them verbatim. They were doing water and sewer improvements, and they were doing it on design, bid, build basis. They had an engineer's estimate of probable cost. Let's say it was $10 million. And they went out to the voters as required and voted $10 million of bonds. They went out to bid, it came in at 12. Okay, they don't have the voted authority to do 12, they have the voted authority to do 10. They go back out to the voters and get additional 2 million. And I mean, think about going to a public vote, mid-sized community, but they got approval for the additional 2 million. They went back out to bid, still not enough, 2 million short again. True story in my home state. They went back to the voters and got approval again. They bid the project, and it came in, the bids came in 300,000 over the 14 million. And they ultimately ended up, they couldn't go back to the voters. They couldn't get any more grant money. They couldn't do anything other than take a lease financing and layer that on top of the bond financing for a little $300,000 piece on top of what is now a $14 million project. Alternatively, had they done this under an ESPC, the performance contracting company would have come in and said, we'll build it. It's not an engineer's estimate, they're guaranteeing it. So maybe they're guaranteeing it at 11, not an estimate of 10, but a guarantee of 11, and they would have had their project. But they didn't do that. They did the approach of design, bid, build, and they ended up 3 or 4 years delayed and $3 or $4 million over budget.
The only thing I would add is these projects, not only are they guaranteed performance, but they're guaranteed price not to exceed. So when we go in and do the investment grade audit, and the price we give our customer is real. There are no such thing as change orders, and if you're looking at large construction projects, it seems like there's always change orders. And it seems like they're going higher and higher. So I don't know, what have you seen, Tim? 10% on, 10% is probably average on change orders. So, I mean, that comes directly out of your bottom line. So these are prices, when we price these projects, it's a guaranteed price as well as guaranteed performance. On top of that, every energy services company may operate a little bit differently, but what we do is we actually have at least 3 bids per project. So it's not just we go in and give you a price and is it high, is it low? We still work with subcontractors and we still walk them through. Now what we do is we put together the design specs because we tell them what the end product has to be. Because the only reason we're gonna get the savings that we promise our customers if we have the design set up ahead of time, and that's what we're looking for performance. But we get 3 bids. Our customers do not have to pick the lowest bid. Okay, so that's probably the big difference with the, low bid process that most public entities are used to. You do not have to pick the lowest bid. Okay, but we still get 3 bids. We sit down as a team and say, who do we think is the best contractor to do this work? And you know what? It may be best to pick someone that's a little bit more expensive because the performance is better and it's going to be a shorter payback for you as the customer.
So Madonna, I'm going to challenge you on the no change orders. So you do a project and you find something is different and it's going to cost a little bit more money. How do you fund that and pay for that change?
If it's a change in scope, that would be a change that would have to be negotiated. But like if we counted all the lights in a school district and we said that there was 5,000 lights and we go through and our subcontractor that's doing the lighting piece, there's 5,100 lights, we would be on the hook for that. Because we told them that we were doing all the lighting fixtures and we missed a room or we missed a closet. That was our fault. But if they said we're gonna do all the interior lighting and then as we start doing the project, they said, oh, no, we also wanna add these 10 parking lot lightings. Well, or parking lot lights, that would be a change order and we would have to bid that out for them and that would be in addition to, because that's a change in scope. We never said we were doing parking lot lighting. And it makes sense, though, to do that while you have the contractors mobilized and on site. So it's usually the best way to do it if the customer comes up with something new that they want to do.
So that was pretty good. I didn't tell her I was going to ask that question. That was a good answer. The point is if the client needs additional work done, that is clearly a change order. But the point is the scope of work that's represented, if there's mistakes or something was missed, in a typical design, bid, build process, you have different entities responsible for different stages. And in the process that the energy service company uses, they're responsible for the scope of work that was developed. If they make a mistake in the scope of work, then that means that that company has to come in and make it right. I know I used to work for an ESCO, and we had a project where the ductwork in the building looked like it was capable of handling air conditioning. And we were going to add air conditioning to the building, but when we got into the ceiling and started measuring, we found that the ductwork was not adequate for air conditioning. So we, on our dime, had to replace all the ductwork in order to make it sized up for the airflow for air conditioning. And we had to do that with no change order, so that came out of our project margin. So the unique thing about the process in the investment grade audit, once they've done the development, they have a firm fixed price and firm fixed savings. And one of the other drivers about the change orders is that since the project is funded through a savings stream, there usually is not an additional savings stream that you missed to fund that change order. And so you don't have money to fund changes. So you have to manage that with the project funds that you have when you project the project, when you sign the contract, and there is no more money available. Are there any other questions today? Yes.
Question about the savings assumptions when you run these models. What do you assume the long-term inflation rate or escalation rate is on utilities for electricity, for example?
So I can take that one. It varies. So a lot of times that's something that you would work with your company to find out what you're comfortable with. There's some standard things you can do. the NIST, National Institute of Standards and Testing, I think it is, maintains a projection table of utility rates. You can go to that. In most cases, we have a fairly good idea of what 1, 2, or 3 years out might look like, and that is often used, and then maybe in the future, because it's so uncertain, it just becomes flat after that. Some customers might say, I want to escalate at 2% for the whole life of the project, and some might say we want no escalation at all during the project. So it really varies.
Apologize, I didn't ask the question.
Oh, okay.
You work for Florida Power and Light, so your customer's going to ask you, what am I going to be paying for electricity rates 10 years from now compared to what I was paying today? What's your model? Because you're quantifying savings in the future based on avoided costs.
Correct. So we can obviously go and share with them what the history has been, but if I could predict the future, I probably wouldn't need to be here at this presentation, because even though we are part of the utility company, we still cannot predict what our rates are going to be. Our escalation is typically very low because our rates in Florida are some of the lowest in the country. I mean, very low. So on the electric side, our escalations are typically, probably closer to 1 or 2%, Tim. They're, we don't use something very high because our rates just don't go up that much. No. I would like to say, with what I do for my customers, I wish our rates would double because there would be a lot more savings to get a lot more done for them. But it's pretty much a struggle because our rates are so low in Florida. So.
And then one other, on that NASA Space Center project, 2 megawatt ground mount, did the customer want to retain the carbon credits? And how did that influence the way the project?
I believe the customer does want to maintain that. We are still finishing up the construction part of that. We're supposed to be done here by the end of this year. As I mentioned, we ran into some supply chain issues with getting some of the solar panels. And what was the second part of your question?
Did the Space Center want to retain the carbon reduction, the SRECs? And how does that affect the project?
Either it's up to the customer if they want to incorporate that and if it's guaranteed or not. So we basically take the initiative from the customer. If they want to use those RECs as a savings to help pay for the project, it's completely up to them. But that's kind of out of our control because the funding is a completely different piece. We work with a financier to coordinate all the financing. We just basically have to guarantee the savings. Have you seen anything different, Tim?
Yeah, so in a federal facility, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll sell the SRECs on the market because they're more valuable than WinRECs, and then they'll buy WinRECs to replace those so that they can meet their sustainable energy or their reduction goals. And because they have an on-site renewable, the way the laws are written for how they get to count their goals, they get double credit if it's on-site. And so it's a weird, contorted mess. I used to work for the department that measured all this, the Department of Energy, and it's just the way that Congress wrote the laws to pressure on-site development versus buying something from far away. But since they have a solar unit on-site, it qualifies as on-site, then they can sell those RECs because solar RECs are more valuable on the market than wind RECs, and wind RECs are plentiful and cheap, and that delta, they'll then use those to fund project improvements. That's common. That's a common case. Department of Defense does that more so. I don't know NASA's history as well, but Department of Defense is very, very adept at doing that. Other questions? You've been a great audience. We're done.